Hello friends, I am Elagatua and I am back with another strategy and replay review video. Today we are going to be talking about a new map that has just been introduced to the Global League Fog rotation. There was a rotation pretty recently with a whole lot of new maps, and this is actually one that I ended up playtesting before it went into the rotation just to see how it felt. And it is called Dirty Martini. So in this video, we'll be going over two separate replays to cover a very uncommon CO matchup that is my fault now for introducing into the meta, I suppose. And before we get into that, let's do our traditional overview of this map, because there is a lot to talk about here to help us understand how to think about this. There's a lot going on from the terrain here, so let's take a look at our bases. That's generally where we start. So we start off with our two bases up in the corners here, and then we've got a neutral base over here that is a little far forward. And we also need to look at our reinforced paths. So this base up here is blocked by this mountain, so the only way that units can go out here is across these forests, which means it's a pretty slow reinforced base to this side over here. And you know that this river here and this river here block any vehicles from going down to the south. So this base is pretty much always going to be dedicated towards this front. And likewise, this base back here is blocked by these mountains, and this mountain kind of gets in the way, and so all vehicles from this base have to go this way. However, because it's just a mountain here, you can send infantry to this side and also to this side. And so what ends up happening here is that this base is going to become kind of our flex base, where we can choose to either reinforce this front or this front. And usually it's going to be with infantry because it can't really reinforce vehicles to this side. And it's a good recon base potentially for the strong side, because you can send recons this way or this way. But it's so far back that if it's not recons, oftentimes it's going to be very slow arriving to the fight. And so you're disincentivized from deploying those kinds of units from this back base. But definitely keep in mind that you can send infantry to this side and from this base to this side, and that's something that you need to plan ahead for, or sorry, from this base rather. That's something you need to plan ahead for, because the infantry deployed from this base, especially going in this direction, it's going to take a long time to get through the front. It's got to go across these mountains, and then here, 2, 3, 4. You know, it's going to be like 4 turns before it even gets to the center of the map where the fighting is going to happen. So you need to be thinking ahead about, you know, where am I going to need more infantry in a couple of turns as you decide which direction to send your infantry. So some long-term strategic thinking is going to be pretty important. Okay, now our third base here. So this one is really our most forward base. So this is your primary base for reinforcements to the fighting, and especially, you know, towards this side and this side. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Really, everything built from this base is going to be able to arrive at the front very quickly. If it's a vehicle, then you have a decent reinforced path going across this reinforced route. You do have to go through this forest, and you should probably always be going through this forest and not around here. It may seem like it doesn't matter, but it does actually matter a little bit. So just make sure that if you're going to go up this way, make sure you always send it through this first forest. The reason for that is if you look at the tank reinforced, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's going to stop here. And then you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which means that you can reach both this mountain and this forest tile in, or at least you can attack units on there in 2 tank moves. It's very important. If you send it across this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can still hit this woods here, but you actually can't hit this mountain. Okay, so you're losing some opportunity there to, and these two tiles end up being very, very important. So you want to have the flexibility to be able to attack units on either one. So anyway, just one of those things, you definitely want to follow this path when reinforcing and not going over. That's your little freebie nitty improvement to improve your gameplay right there. Just it's just always better to go that way. All right, so that's like kind of the tank reinforce, and there's a lot of shoals and roads in this area kind of leading up here, right? So this is very fast movement for things like recons, and tanks can move pretty quickly, and neither your recons or your tanks are going to be slowed down too much by the forests, because they are more than, or they're within the normal movement range, so you're not going to get blocked. You're not going to get your sixth spot blocked off by one of these forests just based on the layout. So those are not going to be an impediment. So that's for vehicles. However, there is another very important feature of this map, which is this black boat. And this black boat can get all the way up here to this square and can go all the way down very far forward into the center of the map to here in one move. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I guess you can go here. Sorry. So most COs can go here from this square, which is still very far forward, because dropping off units here and here puts you within one move of this city and also this comm tower, which is a very important location on the map. So you're going to be able to ferry infantry very efficiently from this base, because they can pop over these mountains in one move and then be directly shuttled basically to the front line immediately in one move. Additionally, you can put infantry here to get to this city very quickly as well. So this black boat is really, really critical, and it's something that you really want to be taking off the HQ and ferrying units with as soon as reasonable. Basically, looking at like day 4 at the latest, to start moving units so that you can get on the center of the map very, very quickly. Another quirk about reinforcing on this map is with this base. We talked about how for this base, how tank reinforcement is not obstructed by the woods at all in any way. However, this reinforced route is super obstructed by the forests, because we have these two forests back to back. And so if we look at the tank reinforce, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we can't actually make it into this forest because that would require 2 moves, which is 1 more than we have. So this tank is going to be a little bit inefficient. And then now, if we want to send him over to the front this way, now he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he's blocked again by this forest. So, and the recon reinforcement is not much better either. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can't go here. You can go here, which is a little bit better, I guess. But then you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or here. So your 2-turn recon reinforce is going to get to like this line here, which is very, very slow for recons when you compare it to the other front, where the other side is going to get 2-turn vehicle reinforced to these 2 squares. But on the weak side, it's substantially slower. So these are important dynamics to keep in mind. The vehicle reinforce to the weak side is going to be quite slow compared to the vehicle reinforce to the strong side is quite fast in comparison. All right, let's look at our airports here. So we got an airport here and an airport here. And this is a pretty far forward airport. And this map is generally pretty good in terms of air efficiency because it is pretty far forward and because there's just a lot of obstruction in the terrain that's going around. And you can get copters over to this side. It's not too crazy. You're looking at like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2. So like this whole area more or less is within 3 copter moves. And then you're getting pretty far down to the other side. 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So again, this line here. So we talked about how this line is like your 2-move vehicle reinforced from here. Well, the same line is also your 2-turn copter reinforce from this airport. And so this is going to come up later. So it's knowing that that line is the 2-turn reinforce for both this base and this airport makes it really, really important to remember. And this map is going to be very heavy on, I guess we call it like sharp positioning, or it's very precise positioning in terms of attacks on this front. And so keeping this line in mind later on is going to help us plan our mid game when we start fighting larger engagements, because things can swing. Having 2 extra vehicles in a fight, whoa, jump scare, 2 extra vehicles in the fight could be the thing that snowballs the game and snowballs the fight one way or the other. As far as other uses for this airport, it's a decent T-Copter map in terms of flexibility, because you can put like a T-Copter here or like a T-Copter here, and then you have the option to flex infantry to either side very quickly, and you're getting around a lot of the obstructions. And your black boat reinforcement to the side here is kind of on a timer, because your black boat is going to run out of fuel eventually. And in this practice game that I'm showing now, see, we're at day 10, and already my black boat is down to like 12 fuel, which means it basically can't do any more ferrying. So once that timer hits day 10 or so, you need to either thinking about an APC or a T-Copter potentially to continue being able to quickly reinforce infantry down to this front, because it is really nice to be able to utilize this kind of the black boat speed to get stuff down here. And if you're not able to maintain that into the mid game, then things become very problematic. You could end up with, if your infantry are walking all the way from this back base, it's just incredibly slow to get them to the fight, and you can end up with an infantry drought. And then even if you're winning your fights, you may not be able to capitalize on it. So that can be pretty a pretty big challenge to deal with. So T-Copters, not necessarily a bad idea, but they're not without a cost. And I think we should start talking about another really important factor on this map, and that is that the overall income level on this map is really, really quite low. The split map, I believe, is 18K for either side if all the properties are split down the middle, and that's quite low compared to most maps that we see in Global League. And so what this means is that compared to other maps, you're going to have less tanks overall. With 18K, you can do things like tank recon if you're not repairing anything, or you can do copter tank, infantry. Those are 2 very common builds that you see with 18K a lot, but you're not going to be able to do 3 tanks. You're probably not going to see a lot of neo tanks. You're probably not going to see a lot of bombers, any of those more expensive tech units, because you would need to save up a pretty substantial amount of income in order to be able to afford those kinds of units. So your copters are going to be more important. But also, anytime you invest in things like T-Copters or transports, that is proportionally a much larger part of your income. 5K from 18K is much more impactful than 5K from 23K or 5K from 25K or something like that. So the more you invest in T-Copters, the more risk you're kind of taking, because those that could be like one vehicle less, potentially like one tank less that you're going to end up fighting with. And in a map where there's just not a whole lot of vehicles overall, that could be enough to, again, swing the fight either way. When we talk about front dynamics on this map, because the fronts are so split off because of these mountains, you're going to end up having fighting on both fronts, because you're going to have to commit some level of reinforcements to this side and also to this side. It's not where you can just blindly deathball everything in the middle very easily and then choose a front to be dominant on. So you really have to pay attention to how much you're committing to either side, and also how much your opponent is committing to either side. And this is, I think, really the challenge of the map. It's there's a lot of positioning involved. It's not just a blind deathball map. It's very, very difficult to just mass everything in the middle and then pick a side, because when we start talking about the contested properties, we'll see this in a second, but really the fighting is going to happen in the corners. And so if you kind of abandon the fighting in the corners to sit in the middle, oftentimes you're going to end up in a difficult situation where you're not fighting where you can actually exploit your victories, because there's just not a whole lot that you can gain from being in the middle. All right, let's talk about contested properties. So the number one contested property is going to be these comm towers. And in some ways, this map reminds me a little bit of the map called Cover V2, which is a map that I've done a map review of. I think the game was Rip versus Get Good. And in that map, a lot of the fighting happens around the comm towers, which are kind of right along the line of contact on either corner. And because they're so contested, it's very possible that potentially both of the comm towers could be denied, or one of the comm towers could be denied. Like you have like a 1-0 kind of situation very easily, or 1-1. And if you get to 2-0, then it's very likely that you're going to be winning the game, because you really need to have a pretty strong position in order to be able to flip the comm tower on a particular front. So this comm tower is the number one contested property on the map, and especially so because it has this mountain behind it. So if you kind of control the mountain, it's going to give you a whole lot of vision over the battlefield here. And so what happens is there often ends up being a lot of fighting of the comm tower, but also this mountain tile. And this mountain tile is, if you can control it, it's generally pretty good for you to avoid having surprises happen, because you're going to be able to see, especially if you're going over here and you've got this tile, then you're going to be able to see the direct reinforce area from your opponent's strong side. And so you're much less likely to be caught off guard, because you can just see all the stuff that is reinforcing. That being said, this mountain tile is 2 turns away from both the airport and the base. So for the player up here, it ends up being pretty challenging to hold on to it. That being said, the tile that reinforces here is a low defense tile. So there's kind of pros and cons, but these two tiles of critical importance, and that's something to keep in mind. This forest tile is also pretty important, but it's kind of there to keep this comm tower safe for this player, because this forest prevents the comm tower from being two-turn reinforced from these, well, from this base specifically. So actually holding the comm tower tile is much easier for the player in the corner to hold than it is to actually hold these this forest tiles. So don't necessarily get baited into thinking that as is this player one? I forget which one's player one, but which the top left player. Don't get baited into thinking that you need to hold this forest tile very aggressively. It's really almost sometimes better to leave it empty depending on the situation, because you could be opening yourself up to activating more reinforcing units from down here. And obviously the same applies for the other side as well. Okay, so that's the comm towers, very contested. Other cities that are contested. This is for sure the second most contested property. This is really one of the few cities that could potentially flip on this map. I think there's very few flippable cities in general, but this is the most exposed, because if you tend to get control over this mountain tile, whichever player you are, then this tile tends to be pretty hard to defend for the other player, because you have a lot of vision, and attacking into it is going to expose you on these road tiles and open you up to counterattacks. And additionally, if you've got this, like let's say you're this player in the bottom right, you got the mountain tile, you got the forest tile, you can put an artillery like here behind the mountains, or like here behind the mountains, and it's pretty well defended, and you can kind of lock down this area pretty easily. So this city ends up being kind of exposed. So the next most contested property is going to be this one back here. And this one reminds me of kind of the back city on Drowned Catacombs, which is the Smacky Cup 4 Round 2 map. And this one is kind of unlikely to fall unless there's a total kind of overrun on this front. And what happens is if the player here kind of has a dominant victory and kind of wipes everything out here, and the player in the bottom right has to retreat to kind of this area of the map, and this city can become exposed because your infantry reinforce is really to this area, as your infantry reinforce is going to be, here, but it's not really here. Like, this is a lot farther away. So if you gain control over this city pretty easily, then it's also potentially going to expose this city as well. That being said, this city is pretty defensible by this airport, and oftentimes if you have recons advancing from this back base, then oftentimes they can kind of path towards this corner as well. So it can be a little bit difficult to flip, but it is, I would say, the third most contested property on the map. And now let's talk about bait properties, because what's a good map without some bait properties? The number one bait property is this city in the center. This city, it looks like it's contested, but it's not actually that contested. The reason for that is that this city is often going to be the first city that gets captured in the early game with reinforcements that are ferried to the center with this black boat. And if that is the case, once this city gets capped, it is kind of hard to ever have it flip anymore, because this is the strong side. There's a lot of infantry getting ferried this way through black boats and whatnot. So there's always going to be a lot of infantry to deny caps of here. And also the terrain is pretty nice with this forest here. So, and this forest is not a particularly good defensive location for this player either, because there's two squares here that are very safe to get to for the player in the bottom right. So you can't just like sit a tank here and have it feel safe. It's very easy to get vision. of this and clear this out. So what ends up happening with the city is it just gets capped in the early game, and then you can't really take it because you can't control the center strongly enough to flip it. And additionally, the fighting tends to happen here and here, and so there's never like enough stuff in the middle, and should stuff go to the middle, it's very hard to conceal it enough to actually, you know, be dominant here, because the reinforce is going to be here and here, and so if your infantry shows up here and here, then the stuff that's already here and here is just going to be like boop, and it's no trouble at all. So anyway, center property, kind of a bait city. Let us talk about these pipe seams. So this is one of the last features of the map that we haven't talked about yet. This one and this one. So the reinforce is kind of convoluted. As we mentioned, this base can only really reinforce this side. But in theory, you could bust down this pipe seam, and you could bust down this pipe seam, and have a lot more flexibility and reinforce, you know, all your units to this front, or potentially, I mean, I guess in theory you could reinforce vehicles this way, even though that would be kind of nuts. Really, if you want to reinforce to this side, you want to bust this pipe seam. So this pipe seam allows this base to reinforce this way. This pipe seam allows this base to reinforce that way. That's kind of the bottom line. The problem ends up being that the value of having additional reinforce this way is not that high compared to the effort that it takes to actually bust down these pipe seams. These pipe seams aren't really making your reinforcements faster. Like you see that on some maps, like Scavenger is a great example, where you bust down the pipe seam and all of a sudden your reinforcements, like every reinforcement built from a certain base arrives at the front faster. But that's actually not the case with these pipe seams. These pipe seams purely just allow bases to reinforce to different fronts than they would normally. They're not actually speeding up your reinforcements. So if you're investing time in killing those pipe seams, you're creating a timing window for your opponent to win fights on the front where your reinforcements would normally be going, but your reinforcements are killing the pipe seam, so they're not fighting at the front. So it's very risky to be attacking these pipe seams, and in general, I don't think there's a lot of reason to even think about fighting them. So just keep that in mind. There's no universal law that says that's the case necessarily, but in general, the pipe seams are probably not worth the time. Okay, lastly, let's talk about this HQ. So this HQ is relatively forward, and you do have a black boat that is normally protecting it, but the black boat provides so much utility for ferrying stuff to the front line that you're almost never going to want to have that black boat stay on the HQ. You're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you do that in terms of your capture phase. So generally speaking, this HQ is far back enough that there's really no world, and the HQ is on the strong side, by the way. So there's really no world in which your HQ could actually get capped, even if you move the black boat off, unless you're playing against Sami, and so we'll get there pretty soon. But unless you're playing against Sami, you don't need to worry about the HQ that much. Feel free to just move the black boat off. You're not going to be at any risk. But yeah, let me take a moment and see if there's anything I've forgotten before we switch over to talking about the CO matchups. Okay, I think it's about that time. Let's start talking about CO matchups. And specifically, we're going to talk about Tier 4 and Tier 3. So in this practice game that I played, this is the one that I'm showing now. I picked Jess because it was a practice game, and I just kind of picked the first thing that came to mind because it's a practice game, and I wanted to just try stuff, even if it's not good. I didn't even look at the map before I really picked Jess. But what I realized about day 10 is that this is an insane Sami map. And I amusingly kind of made me lose interest a little bit in the practice game, because I realized that I was kind of trolling myself by not being Sami. There are a lot of reasons that make Sami much better on this map than she would be on a normal map. And we're going to go through them all, so get comfortable. All right. So first of all, this black boat, well, it can move an extra square as Sami, but also because it is 2 moves away from this base, you can get mechs to the front line much more quickly than you would be able to otherwise. So mechs are, their movement disadvantage is somewhat mitigated by very fast reinforce to the front line. That's one reason. Another very important reason is the location of this airport. So this base here is your flex base, primarily going to be shuttling infantry to the front lines. However, if we look at the position with a Sami T-Copter, gets 1 extra move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So what this means is that this T-Copter, if built from this airport, can actually go back here in 1 move and very efficiently use this back base to ferry mechs to this front very, very, very quickly. And if you look at, so it goes from here to here, and then the next move is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can plop mechs in 1 move directly into this forest, which is right on the front line, and potentially could hit any vehicles that are on this comm tower. So that's a very powerful ability, because this base, normally, you're going to need 4 moves to get infantry kind of all the way up to like this line. But if you have T-Copter, every other turn, you're going to slingshot 1 infantry directly to the fighting. So it's very, very, very strong. And additionally, if you put the T-Copter here on this side, or even if you leave it here, you have the option to flex infantry up this way because you're flying over that river. And so you're going to be able to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're going to get infantry all the way up here, which is, you know, pretty substantially faster than having to go 1, 2, 3, 4, right? It's going to end up in this in this area and be like 1 or 2 moves away from the fighting. And so it's going to make this back base substantially more powerful because you're flying over the mountains and you're getting that extra T-Copter movement as Sami, and it's going to turn this base as one that you don't really want to build vehicles from into a base that can produce a lot of mechs and still get them to the front line very quickly. And mechs are very good on this map because it is low income. And so this lowers the number of vehicles that are going to be on the map in general. And so it is far more viable for you to build up a critical mass of mechs because your opponent does not have the funds to produce, copter tank recon every turn. You're really looking at probably 2 vehicles per turn for your opponent. And if you're ferrying mechs with the black boat and you've got a T-Copter ferrying mechs this way, you're getting the potential to do something like copter mech infantry, which is going to be essentially, mechs are not vehicles, but copter mech infantry is something that 3 of those units can fight against vehicles, and the best that your opponent's going to be able to do is usually 2 vehicles per turn. So if that's sustained over the long run, then you're going to have more things that kill vehicles, more so than your opponent has vehicles, and that is a very good thing for Sami. Another reason why Sami is much better than usual on this map is because of the HQ positioning, and because the black boat is absolutely vital to the capture phase. And so there's really two choices that your opponent can make. One, they can respect the danger of a victory march winning the game by capturing the HQ, and they leave their black boat on the city, or on the HQ, in which case your capture phase is going to be substantially better than your opponent. And the other alternative is that they move the black boat off, but then when it comes time to victory march, your opponent is going to be forced to really commit very heavily to this front to be able to zone out the infantry from this HQ. And keep in mind, 5 moves from the HQ is this comm tower. Okay, so if you're controlling the comm tower on your weak side, then you, as Sami, are implicitly threatening the HQ because your infantry can reach, and also this mountain, for what it's worth. So if you have a strong command over the weak side, when victory march hits, your opponent they have to fight you, otherwise they're risking losing the game. So those are all the reasons why Sami is better than she usually is on this map. The question is, how good is she then? She's better than usual, which means that she's probably going to be very strong in tier 4. My theory was that she might even be strong enough for tier 3 on this map. And so I went back to the Global League. It was my first Global League game in over a year. And I got this map as my first game in tier 3. And I was like, well, tier 3 usually means you're going to be playing against Kindle, because I think Kindle's pretty strong right now, as I'm sure you've heard in any other video that I've made that involves playing Kindle. And I was like, Sami might even be good enough to play against Kindle on this map. Now, I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but hear me out. I wasn't completely confident, but it was kind of a theory, and I was curious enough. I was like, yeah, I might give this a shot. So Sami versus Kindle, not the match up that you've seen a lot of. Probably, maybe you've never even seen this matchup. I had never played this matchup before, the games that we're going to talk about today. But Sami has some things going for her against Kindle. So first of all, Sami is somewhat protected against recon harass, because you really do need 2 recons harassing Kindle to be able to fully clear an infantry off. If you're only attacking with 1 recon and nothing else, you can weaken infantry, but it's not going to actually stop the cap. The cap will still go through the following turn. Additionally, Kindle's CO power damages units on cities, and that's a good counter to having your cities capped, because you have a full infantry HP on a city, trying to take it away from Kindle, and then Kindle just pops COP, and then it takes the infantry down to 7, and then it's going to take an extra turn to capture. But with Sami, that is not actually going to stop anything, because the 7 HP infantry is still going to finish capturing that city. So Sami has a little bit of a built-in counter to the Kindle CO power. And additionally, Kindle does not have any sort of movement boosting powers. And when you look at the areas of the map where the fighting is going to occur, it's really this area here and this area here. And one thing you'll notice about this area is that there's not a whole lot of properties in this area. There is the comm tower, and that's pretty much the main one. But in terms of like the Kindle day-to-day of having stuff on cities, being able to like one-shot tanks and things like that, it's not really a great Kindle map by Kindle standards, at least compared to other maps. So taking into account all these factors, I was like, hey, let's give it a shot. Let's see if we can make this work. And so I locked in Sami against Kindle. And now I think it is time. Let's switch over to the game and let's see how it goes. All right, we're back on a clean Dirty Martini, clean dirty. Anyway, and this game is going to be myself against Husky91 New Jersey, I presume. And my opponent is ranked number 4 currently on the global league with overall record of like 80-20 or something like that. So this is a very skilled opponent near the top of the ladder, and I'm going to be going against. And as predicted, they are going to be playing Kindle against my Sami. So let's get this thing going. We're going to show full vision for a little bit, just to see how things go. And so nothing too crazy going to be happening in the openers for now. Just capturing the things closest to me at the start. So this is one of the advantages for player 2. As soon as you capture this base, this infantry is going to be slingshotted to the center of the map immediately. And likewise, I can do the same thing. So my opponent going to be moving this blackboat off the HQ. So we talked about the 2 choices that you have when you're playing against Sami. You either cripple your capture phase by keeping the blackboat safe on the HQ, or you have to worry about victory march later on. So I think my opponent correctly is going to be using the blackboat, and we'll deal with the victory march problems later on. I am going for a day 4 recon. And so my idea here is I want to counter a potential aggressive capture of this comm tower. And if this black boat sends this infantry to here, and then he goes here, I'm basically set up to use this recon and this infantry to kill the infantry and then cap the comm tower with this guy and basically steal it back immediately. I don't know if my opponent will actually do that. And if that doesn't happen, then I'm going to try and go for this comm tower very aggressively with the hopes that I can basically get this comm tower and maybe deny or delay this comm tower. And if somehow I'm able to get both comm towers, then Sami has a lot of utility, because Sami with 2 comm towers, Sami's CO power, the infantry will then one-shot any enemy infantry on no defense terrain, which there is a lot of in this map, especially around the contested areas. So that is a potential victory condition for Sami that I'm thinking about, but that's getting kind of far ahead of myself. For now, I'm just focusing on locking down this comm tower with this opening. So we see that my opponent is going to be using the infantry here, which probably means that it's going to be this city, not this comm tower. Now, this black boat could have gone here, but I do kind of like this. It's like the little things, right? Like this lander is going to have fuel problems eventually, because it's going to be ferrying units back and forth. So if you're only going to capture this city, then leaving the lander, or sorry, leaving the black boat here saves you 1 fuel, which could end up being 1 extra turn of black boat later on in the game. So a nice little efficiency going on there. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like my plan to ambush anything on this comm tower is going to work out, but I don't know that yet. And then we've got a lot more infantry popping off. So definitely there was the option for like a recon on this turn, but it's just going to be more infantry. And then I'm ignoring this city for now. I will be getting this one later on in the chain, because I want this infantry to be a little bit closer to the front. I'm anticipating that we may be having some fighting over here early on. And I too could be going for this, and actually I think I probably should have put the black boat here. So that's something I'll keep in mind for future games, I guess. But regardless, I'm going to be going for the more economic opening and go for the city. One reason I'm not going for this comm tower very early on, one, it's more economical to not go for it. And two, if my opponent is doing something similar to what I'm doing with this early recon, then this is likely to get punished. This is likely to be too quick to actually do anything about. And as Sami playing against Kindle, you should probably anticipate your opponent going recons relatively early on. That's just kind of the standard thing for Kindle to do against Sami. So I'm anticipating that play from Kindle, even though we see with our map hacks that that's not actually happening. Later on, we'll switch off the full vision, but for now, it's just helpful to see everything because I will be showing you what's. I'll be showing you why the vision won't be giving away too much in a moment. So this is a nice little efficiency here. Once the airport is capped, you can boost this infantry up to here, and then it's going to reach here more quickly. So you should definitely be doing that in your openers. So good efficiency for my opponent. And then this is nice as well. So gets the boost, and now 2 infantry are ready to go into this lander to get shuttled up to here. So nice opener. And interestingly enough, my opponent, 10,000 gold, could go for a tank here, ends up going with an artillery. So thinking about doing an artillery push. One nice thing about the artillery is you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, or sorry, counting is hard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so 2-turn artillery ends up on this silo pad, and then it can hit anything that's on this mountain. So artillery pretty good on this map. Like this position is very, very difficult to reach from this player in the top left from player 1. So very, very difficult to hold onto this mountain if your opponent has an artillery on the silo there. So I move my recon here, and disappointingly, I see that this infantry is here on the city, and I can't. I'm too late to do anything about that. Day 3 recon from the city could potentially be a thing in the future. I don't know, because you can end up denying this city, and it's pretty hard to do anything about. So it's one of those like settles as still water kind of situations, whereas the player 1 D3 recon, you can deny this. Could be a thing in the future as the meta progresses, so that's something to keep your eye on. Because I don't think this is really defensible very easily without an early recon from this base. I guess, yeah. We don't need to fully go through the metagame. I think this could be a thing. Anyway, and so here, now I'm setting up to either get this comm tower, or I could think about taking these cities early on. I think it is good to get this city, just because, like I mentioned, if you don't get it early, there's a potential that you can get it denied, and then it could stay neutral for a long time, which you don't really want. And then once it's yours, it's pretty much safely yours for the rest of the game. And I'm going to be doing something a little bit similar with my black boat here, boosting the infantry. I've got this infantry here, and I'm going for early T-Copter. Sami, T-Copter's very, very good. And the T-Copter is going to allow an infantry to get down here very, very quickly to get that cap a lot earlier than you would be able to get normally. And I'm hoping that this recon can kind of buy me enough time to get set up down here. We'll see how that goes. A lot of infantry showing up down there. This capture phase by my opponent, I think, is pretty well thought out. I do like that that Kindle is delaying these 2 cities, because there's just a lot to be gained from getting out on the map quickly. So it's well designed. And this is a 9K income turn. I think this is what my opponent was going for. So you go for the early artillery, and then the next turn ends up being a 9K turn, which is obviously a very good number, because that either means tank infantry or recon infantry. And so my opponent is going to go recon infantry, which is quite sensible in my opinion. And interestingly, the recon is going to end up from this back base. So my opponent is really using this base as an infantry base to get a lot of infantry aggressively here, but that is going to slow down the it's going to slow down the push, because there's going to be no vehicles able to fight on this front for a little bit longer. And now I send this recon into this forest. This is not a place where I want to stay for long, and it's quite risky, because if my opponent opens day 5 tank, then it's not a kill of the recon, but it's free damage on the recon, because you can send this infantry here and then hit it with the tank that's built on day 5. But this is going to likely secure this comm tower for me, because there's no way that any of these guys can make it up here. And also, it does block this infantry from accomplishing anything. So this recon, it's not even there to do damage. It's just kind of there to be in the way and to be well protected. And if there was only 1 infantry that got ferried up, then it's very possible that this infantry could bonk into the recon, which would be pretty nice, because there's no vision of here. And if there was vision, then the vision wouldn't even necessarily help that much, because you just kind of see a recon go into the woods, but then you can't really do anything about that. So I finish a bunch of caps, and we're going to go for this comm tower and get this comm tower locked down, because we know that well, we can't really hold it for that long. And we're starting to get some value out of this T-Copter. Gonna get some more money from that city. And now we're gonna set up the artillery here. And the idea is that we get this comm tower early. We're expecting our opponent to want to fight over here, because this is the strong side for our opponent. 2 bases reinforcing this way. So we want to put a artillery in this forest and just kind of sit back and force our opponent to come to us here in order to be able to secure this comm tower. The one downside is that when you open recon T-Copter artillery, this is a very slow developing build. And so if you run into like 2 or 3 recons from your opponent, especially on this side, you're not going to have too much to be able to counter that for a while. And that's just the plus and minus of this opener. There's no opener on this map that's completely safe. So you have to choose something and just live with it. So this infantry is going to come up and see this recon now. So now this infantry, it's actually pretty nice for me, because this infantry was shuttled up here pretty quickly. But now it can't do anything. Like this infantry can accomplish absolutely nothing this turn. And I would love so much to just be able to hit this infantry with my recon that's in the woods, but this artillery is there, so now I have to leave. And so it's both good and bad. And this is why I was kind of showing you the game with full vision, because I end up seeing kind of everything that's happening for the most part. So it doesn't really hurt the game at all, because I'm pretty much able to reconstruct all of this based on what I see with this recon. But yeah, so I can't hold on to this position, but the early recon does ultimately, well, first of all, it tells me that there's an artillery here. And that's really important, because I know that there can't be any tanks available until next turn, because you can kind of reconstruct the income for your opponent once you know the first vehicle buy like this. And I know that there's very likely going to be either a tank coming this way next turn, because I know my opponent has a 9k turn coming up the previous turn. There's either going to be a tank coming up this way, or there's going to be two recons, and I'm expecting a recon to be built from like this base and this base. So I'm expecting either 2 recons, 1 on each side, that'll be showing up next turn, or 1 tank probably coming this way. So the recon's giving me a lot of information, even though it's not really doing any damage, and we do secure this comm tower. And this infantry kind of can't do anything, but it can kind of threaten to get on this mountain, which is not super ideal, and getting extra little boosty. So 3 infantry here already is a pretty substantial threat to this position here. And I really have nothing to be able to contest this. And I think at this point, let us switch over. We're going to switch over to my vision now for the rest of this game. So this is the challenge of playing Sami. Sami needs a little bit of time, especially if you're going to the T-Copter. Sami needs a little bit of time to kind of get things going. And so you don't really want to be fighting too much, especially not vehicle fights, until you kind of have things set up and your stuff in position. So I don't really want to fight too much until this artillery online, and I've got like some mechs going down to the other side. So it's a little bit uncomfortable. And so what I have to do here is I'm pretty much going to be sacking this infantry. This infantry for sure is going to die, but Sami infantry with 1 tower on a mountain knocks this guy down to 2, and we're essentially trading 1 infantry for 1 infantry. This guy will run away and get repaired, surely, but this should slow down the push enough for me to be able to get this artillery in a position where I can fight. Because once the artillery is here, then I'm not really at risk of losing the comm tower anymore. I get it in these forests, and you know, what's Kindle going to do? So we put the recon here. And remember, this spot is out of 2-turn reinforce from both of these spots. So it seems like, wow, this recon is on 0 HP terrain, but I know that this recon is absolutely safe, and there's no way that anything's going to be able to reach this. And this just prevents more than 1 unit from being able to get on to this mountain. And specifically, so this artillery is going to hit this guy, and then I guess so this guy can move back, and then maybe this guy comes and clears the infantry, and then this guy potentially could fight this. But if that happens, then we're just going to be kind of fighting over the mountain, and I've got a recon and an infantry, and so we can kind of trade infantry back and forth for a little bit, which is not the worst. But I'm really just trying to stall on this front until I'm online. Another thing that I'm thinking about is if we end up doing a bunch of like fighting over here, maybe this base or the city might end up being kind of surprise attackable. And so I'm going to set up the possibility of coming in with this infantry and capping the city, and then sneaking this guy this way. And this is especially something that I would consider if we see a tank kind of pop up this way. Because if we see the tank pop up this way, then there's not going to be any vision for our opponent. We know that there's either going to be probably a tank or 2 recons that were built the previous turn that are going to come into vision this turn. So we don't have to necessarily commit to that, but it is a possibility that I'm contemplating. It's a little bit cheeky, but see how that goes. And now I can start to work on getting some mechs with this black boat, and this guy can get in here too. Or actually, this guy can probably make it into the T-Copter. I'm not sure what my plan was with the T-Copter. We'll see what I end up doing. And then I've got a tank here, and so we're expecting to fight over here. We are thinking, oh, my opponent sees this comm tower and is like, no, that's my comm tower. And we're expecting Kindle to kind of send the majority of the forces up here. And so we are trying to do that while committing a little bit of money to start building up kind of some mechs down here. But we're not really investing too much in this bottom side. And we're potentially even conceding this comm tower for a little bit if our opponent wants to take it. So that was a very important moment right there. We saw the recon loop through here. So what that means for us is that 9K turn that I was talking about, that we know about because we kind of reconstructed, well, I reconstructed his opening just kind of in the move planner. We know that if the recon came this way, then there's almost certainly a recon that was built from the other front base. And so that means that the recon is going to end up likely on one of these two squares based on just how far it can move. So hold that thought for a little bit, but that's something that I'm aware of now because I saw that recon. It's going to end up being very important in a little bit. This infantry moves back. And this infantry elects to keep the artillery safe here, so that's kind of nice. Nothing ends up being on this mountain, which I like. That being said, our plan to kind of sneak attack this city, well, abort. We will not be doing that anymore. We saw the recon come across, so my opponent knows that probably both of these infantry are over there. So we we don't need to commit to a plan that's not going to work. So we don't commit to a plan that's not going to work. Now, the next thing that I want to do, this is kind of a very specific move. I want to see if my opponent is going for this comm tower. If my opponent has not gone for the comm tower yet, then I'm going to be set up to fight down here with infantry as much as possible. And I know that there's likely going to be a recon in one of these two squares. And so the vision is going to extend to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to extend to this line right here. So this is as far as the theoretical recon can see. And we know it's very likely that a recon is going to be in this area to see that far. So what I want to happen is I want the recon to see this infantry. And I also get some information here that the comm tower hasn't been taken. So that's really nice because that means that I'm going to be able to contest this for a long time now. The timing window for my opponent to get that comm tower for free, I want my opponent to be able to see this infantry because I'm going to be moving this mech as a trap. The mech positioned deliberately just out of range of where the recon that we are very confident exists is going to be set up. So our hope is that the recon is going to see, ooh, look at this juicy infantry here. I bet I could come onto this forest and kill the infantry. But it's pretty unlikely that there's a bunch of infantry on any of these three squares, because if there's infantry here, they very likely would have been capping the comm tower. So I think it's very likely that we could bait the recon in to kill this infantry and then counterattack with this mech. And if that doesn't happen, then that's fine too, because then that'll allow us to set up the mech to be close to this mountain and to potentially assault this comm tower with the infantry. So, but we're at least setting a trap in theory. But our black boat is almost out of fuel, so we're going to need to be leaning more on this T-Copter to be shuttling stuff down going forward. And now we are one turn away from having our artillery in this forest. We could have actually moved this artillery onto the city, but we've chosen to leave it one square behind. And that is because our opponent is 1,000,000% going to get an infantry on this mountain next turn. And we don't want to give away any information for free. After all, if if our opponent doesn't know that we've invested in the artillery, then for all they know, it could be a recon or a tank down on the other front. So we don't want to give away how much we've invested in either side. Make our opponent's decision-making as difficult as possible. And we can still get into the forest here next turn without any issues. And our infantry is set up in a position where if our opponent comes in and tries to attack the tower, we actually have enough infantry to kill a cap attempt on this tower, and then also to remove an infantry that's on the mountain as well, which will allow us to sneak the artillery into the forest without our opponent knowing it's there. So I don't know exactly what our opponent's going to attempt, but that's what we're going to try to set up with this positioning. And also we are lined up out of infantry range of our opponent. So if our opponent moves in too strongly, then we're going to be Sami fighting Kindle with, we've got 1 tower, Kindle has 0 in an infantry fight, which is probably going to go well for Sami. So we're really kind of hoping that, yeah, like come fight me like in this area here. This is what I want. I'm set up for this. I'm pretty weak down here. I've got very little invested down here. And I'm going to go for the second T-Copter. This is a little bit greedy, but it's the power of every other turn we're going to have a 2 mech turn. So this is probably one of the slowest developing builds that you can go as Sami, and I'm just trying to buy as much time as I can so that everything can get online. Because as soon as we get into the mid game and I'm pumping out a lot of mechs, we're going to be relying on the dynamics of having, again, copter mech infantry. Every other turn we can do that, and we're going to have 3 things that can attack vehicles versus likely two vehicles from our opponent. And in the long run, that's going to work out in our favor in terms of just overall numbers. That being said, it's very weak against a very strong push towards either side, because the total amount of fighting stuff we have right now is much lower because we've invested 10k funds in the T-Copter. Now we're going to get some of those funds back because we got this city earlier than we would otherwise. So we're going to get some free money from that that'll kind of balance things out. But there's like a 2 to 3 turn window where we really don't want to be taking any big fights. We can trade some infantry back and forth, like that's not a big deal, but we really don't want to be having a big vehicle fight in the next 2 or 3 turns, or maybe even 4 or 5 turns is not really ideal until we really get both of these T-Copters getting us a lot of mechs to the fronts. We go artillery here, thinking we don't even necessarily need to take this comm tower. If we can just deny this comm tower by having the artillery here, our opponent kind of showed us how strong that is to have an artillery on that tile. And then we can kind of just sit back here and send infantry to deny this. And in the long run, if we are on 1 comm tower and Kindle's on 0, then that's going to be the infantry fighting is going to be very good for me in the long run. So infantry goes on the mountain, but cannot see this artillery, which is what we designed. We know that this recon is safe, by the way, because if there was a tank, we would have seen it. So this position is no problem. See an infantry come in here. And this is exactly what we want. It's the recon comes in here. We knew it was likely to be in the vicinity. Infantry comes in here and nothing else. And now this is a free recon. So this is a very, very big deal because this is Sami mechs are really good. This is a one-shot. This is a one-shot for this mech. This recon is just going to get killed. So goodbye. And now we know that there's two infantry over here. If our opponent has another infantry that is able to get the comm tower, I can't really do anything about that. But getting the recon for basically free is still very good. I do want to try and win the infantry fight very heavily over here because this side can actually become my pushing side. In order to commit any amount of force to this side, Kindle has to be committing vehicles from this base and probably infantry from this base. But Kindle would have had to decide already to commit infantry from this base earlier on, because it takes a long time for the infantry from this base to arrive over here. So we're kind of hoping that maybe Kindle is focusing infantry on this side, using that black boat reinforce, and that if we win a decisive infantry fight over here, then we can just kind of bleed our opponent out of infantry and then take over this corner and then play defense over here and maybe get both comm towers, something like that. In order to get vision, though, we have to move this T-Copter down a square, which is not really what we wanted to do. It would have been nicer to be able to move this T-Copter back to be able to get more mechs, but in my opinion, it's more valuable in this scenario to just have a good infantry fight, and also this ends up protecting this mech, because now these infantry are in no position to fight against the mech. But it is going to slow down our infantry reinforce on this front. So it does come at a price, but that's one other nice thing about this is that this guy can potentially get ferried onto the mountain for free next turn before this T-Copter retreats. So that's kind of one piece of synergy that is a possible thing next turn, depending on what ends up happening. I kind of expected this to be happening, especially when this tower wasn't being capped. I was like, well, there was probably an infantry capping this, and then the infantry probably went here instead. So kind of interesting, actually. This infantry likely could have been capping the comm tower, but instead went for this city. You can judge whether that was the right call, but unfortunately, I don't have any vision. I don't have any way to get vision of this and also see what's in this forest. I could have, I guess, used the T-Copter for vision here if I wanted, but then I wouldn't be able to fight the infantry in here. So it's just the consequences of this very slow opener from me having these two T-Copters means I don't have like any sort of recon down here. And if I had a recon, then I would definitely be able to deny this, because infantry fighting infantry as Sami is something you really, really want. But getting this recon overall, really, really good start for me. And we do know that there's a recon over here somewhere, so I just want to make it as difficult as possible for like any sort of recon to come in here and try to hit this mech on the river. Because if that does happen, I don't really have a good backup plan. So we're just kind of blocking the potential ways for something to come in. Although we're expecting the recon maybe to be still up here or maybe on this city instead. But better safe than sorry. And now we do have this this artillery in here. I was thinking about maybe killing this infantry, because I don't like just showing my hand for free that the artillery is in here. But at the end of the day, I don't really want to trade 2 infantry for 1 infantry, because this artillery is in pretty good position. So we just kind of give away the information for free and live with it. And now this T-Copter is in the happy position that we talked about in the map overview, where this base is going to be slingshotting infantry over to this front, because we're expecting the fight to happen here. And now Copter, mech, infantry. This is the power of Sami, because the mechs are so cheap and they can get to the front line so quick. you can really spam unit count much more easily as Sami than you can with other COs. So this is kind of the goal that we're building towards. And if we can survive like the next 2 or 3 turns and kind of keep the status quo, where we've got one comm tower and we're denying this comm tower, then we're going to be in pretty much a winning position where we're going to finally have our build online and we're going to be ready to fight. And then it's going to be, big infantry fights with Sami and with mechs. And that's what we want. So this infantry shows up down here. I'm actually kind of fine with this because this infantry is now done. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to send him on top of the city anymore, or sorry, on top of the mountain. But we can continue to fight here because Sami infantry are just so ridiculous. It's plus 30 attack to infantry and then plus another 10 from the comm tower. So even though this is a high defense tile, it's not really going to matter that much. And so this recon doing really good work. We know exactly where that artillery is going to be, and we know that, okay, there's going to be an attempt to lock down that city there. Okay. So not a whole lot happened here. So that, first of all, that's kind of good because, again, we got the recon. We traded a recon, or he traded a recon for an infantry, which is what we want. So that means I'm thinking I'm going to be really strong down here, and then this is set up to be a big fight. And so my opponent is going to push into here to try and secure this comm tower on the back of the artillery. However, we do need to deal with this situation. We can't really let Kindle get both of these cities. Being down 2k on this map is kind of a lot. And we're not actually technically down 1k yet because we know that our opponent has not taken this city yet, and we've had this city already. So if our opponent gets this city, they will then be up in income. And then if in like a turn or two, they're going to get to this city and they'll be ahead in income regardless. But it'll only be 1k, and 1k is actually not a super decisive thing. But we are kind of obligated to delay this. So first of all, we are going to go in here because we would like to use our infantry down here to finish off the weakened infantry that we know retreated. And again, we are thinking that we are strong here and that we are likely to be weak here. And if we're strong here and weak here, then our game plan is just kind of delay this for a little bit until we're in a position where we can get both of these. And if we get both of these, then we just split the income, no problem. Split income is perfectly fine. And then we just defend both comm towers with the artillery and let Kindle try to attack us. And we're likely going to be in a winning position in that scenario. So we're feeling pretty good about the game at this point. We just want to make sure that we get this comm tower as best we can, thinking that, we kind of position everything relatively aggressively here, and this is a nice little synergy here. And this river is protecting us from the north, so it's pretty unlikely that any vehicles are going to be able to come through and kill this infantry and then also be able to hit this mech, given what we see, which is like nothing in this area, and then these 2 infantry retreated down this way. So it's kind of hard for us to be in much danger given what we see here. So feeling pretty good about this scenario, and we just come in, free infantry. It's just Sami things. Obviously, this guy will die, but you trade 1 infantry for 1 infantry in that situation, and then your opponent has to spend time killing off this guy as well later on, so that's fine. And seeing nothing, this is pretty vulnerable. And Kindle actually has a hard time dealing with tanks on cities because Kindle's on 0 comm towers and the CO power is not online. So actually, this is not very risky at all. We know where the artillery is. And we see that we've had this city for a little bit longer, so the income difference is not really that concerning. And we're just going to delay this city as well. So this is pretty nice. Like, we just deleted 3 infantry with a first strike. And we don't see a whole lot. So it's possible that, you know, if all the stuff is like kind of over here in the darkness, that, you know, we could like lose all of this pretty easily, especially like this guy's not in great terrain here. I don't know about this. How about this infantry? I feel like this may be a little bit of an overextend, but regardless, we're going to set up this artillery here, and this is kind of a nice position. You would think that maybe this artillery is not in good position because it's next to this comm tower, and so if we ever lose this comm tower, then, you know, like a tank or recon could end up on the city and get the Kindle day-to-day to clear out this artillery pretty easily. But it's going to be really hard for the tank to get removed because it's on a high defense terrain, and this mountain is blocking vehicles from coming in. We've got this infantry in the forest as well, so in terms of unit count, like it's just really hard to clear all these guys and then also clear this guy and then have enough to, you know, have something hit the artillery as well. One thing is for sure though, with this positioning, we're gonna get attacked this turn. Kindle has to attack this somewhere, because if Kindle gives up this comm tower, it's kind of game over. Or if Kindle can't put pressure on this comm tower, it's also kind of game over. So we've set ourselves up pretty well, and we're feeling like this is pretty good defensive terrain. We're on our side of the map on both fronts for the most part, and we're set up to receive an attack about as well as we could. And we just had a pretty good infantry trade up here. So this game has been going absolutely swimmingly so far, and we got the free recon kill down here earlier. So this is a really, really good situation. We've got all this infantry that's going to show up here because we've been really heavily reinforcing this side, expecting that we're going to, you know, we need to trade some infantry, right? Because we got to go into this artillery. So we're going to lose some infantry. We're going to kill some infantry, but we got a lot of infantry coming, and now we've got this mech showing up as well. And again, this mech supporting this artillery. So if somehow like a tank comes up here and the infantry comes on here to clear this guy, and then like a recon or something comes in and hits this artillery, well, we've got the mech to back it up. So we're set up to fight here. We're gonna have a really nice surprise counterattack if we receive a big commitment on this front. And so this is an interesting move. So I actually hit this pipe seam here, and the reason I hit this pipe seam is because I'm not really sure which direction this copter needs to go, because we don't see that much, right? Like, we see basically nothing down here. We see like no vehicles up here, so we're not really sure which front our opponent is committing to. And so I really want the option to be able to flex the copter to either front depending on where I get attacked, because we're going to get attacked somewhere this turn, right? Like, it's just, we have to be getting attacked somewhere this turn. So the downside to doing this is I'm basically giving free information away that there's a copter on this exact tile. The plus side to killing this is, should the game go on and we can kind of survive this next turn, I'm going to invest anti-air artillery. I'm going to the second artillery that might work on this pipe, and now it's going to take 2 artillery hits to kill the rest of this. And then I have the ability as we start looking ahead towards like the superpower, which, you know, could be 5 or 6 days ahead, I could basically put together an attack where I send all 3 bases to the HQ side to try and set up for a game-winning victory march. So if the game slows down, the option is there to break open the pipe seam. This is one of the few situations in which I think anybody should ever consider breaking open the pipe seam. This is a very, very specific case. And it's still very risky because I am giving free information away about this copter. And so it is 5 moves away from the airport. So I'm not really limiting the copter's movement very much by investing time to busting this down. But if I put like the copter here, for example, then at least he's like covering the mech. And I looked at like this front, and I didn't really feel like the extra movement was gonna cost me reinforcements on this front. But again, I think I'm strong down here, so I'm kind of not expecting to need this copter on this front. Really, I just want to verify that I'm gonna get attacked on this front so that I can flex the copter up here. So that's the idea there. Okay, so big yikes. This turn was a catastrophe for me. Boy, was I not correct about what my opponent was doing. This was a really, really big surprise to me to see 2 copters show up. I want to kind of pause a moment and just reflect upon how surprising this move is from my opponent. First of all, it's a great move for my opponent. Let's talk about why it's a great move. The reason it's a great move is because it's really, really unexpected. So first of all, this recon likely was the recon that we saw up here on like day 7 or so, and likely it got front shifted down this way without me seeing it. So it's a really well executed front shift by my opponent, and the fact that there was another infantry, I was kind of surprised to see another infantry over here, and then also the tank as well. I kind of, in my mind, I'm kind of thinking maybe the artillery, or maybe the recon and the tank both originally were built from this base and then got shifted across the center where I don't have a lot of vision, and then surprise hit me here. Additionally, this copter is a 3-turn copter. So it's built 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this copter has been committed to this front it was built on like day 8, I think. Right? So this is a very, very early copter build by my opponent. Early copter builds are also very, very risky, because if your opponent, early copter builds are kind of relying on your opponent just not having a copter of their own or not having anti-air. And this position here, this line is actually 2 copter moves away from my airport. So this is incredibly risky, because if I commit a copter to this front, then I could counterattack into this. And with this copter committed here, this is a 2-turn copter from this base. I pretty much know that this is the only copter. This, like, if this copter is instead here and doesn't hit this pipe seam, then I'm going to be attacking into this copter for free, and it's basically the end of the game. Because there's going to be nothing to back up this copter. And my copter, I'm going to get copter superiority on this front, and then Kindle can no longer fight. basically. Because then you can't push into both a copter and an artillery. It's not going to happen. Instead, my artillery gets no value. My mech gets bopped, and I have nothing to confront these vehicles. And I also don't even get the comm tower. And now I'm definitely not even going to be able to win the fight in this corner, which is really bad. The only good thing I have going for me down here is I can send this guy and this guy and kill this full HP infantry. So there's no real risk to any of my back properties, especially this property. Like there's no way that Kindle's going to really be able to threaten this, because Kindle just doesn't have any full HP infantry. And this guy, I can send this infantry into him to weaken him pretty strongly, and then that's going to prevent any threats to. I'm basically hoping that, okay, if I lower these infantry enough, I can, even though I'm going to lose the fight here, I have to retreat, I can at least weaken the infantry enough that I'm going to be able to delay this comm tower for a while, ideally. Because all the infantry are weak, and then I can just kind of retreat, and we suck it up and live to fight another day, even though we got bruised. This mech still did his job because he got a free recon earlier, so we didn't like take any vehicle losses here. It's just kind of it's going to ruin the infantry deathball, but it's not fatal damage, but it's about the worst thing that could have possibly happened to us. Now on this front is actually not super horrible. Even though the copter is here, this artillery is very exposed, and we do have the anti-air that was built a turn ago. So our opponent's the opponent's on a timer with this copter, and the infantry fight. I mean, we've got a lot of infantry reinforcing, so we can still kind of fight this even with the copter here. It's this front that is like, we thought we were strong down here, and we were very wrong. And so that is not a good situation. So anyway, we're going to trade out our infantry. We know we're probably going to lose these two. But the hope is like, okay, we bait these guys down here. They have to finish off these two infantry, but then that at least allows us to kind of retreat this stuff to kind of regroup over here, and then we can maybe delay the comm tower still. Was not happy that this infantry existed. And at this point, I'm like, how is Kindle having like so much infantry? Like, I've got 2 T-Copters, and I've been transporting stuff with the black boat, and like I feel like I've been killing like a lot of infantry, and there's just more infantry like forever. There's always more infantry. Where is it all coming from? So not happy to see this here. And now I have to worry about protecting this city, which is not great either. But we do get at least some artillery value here, and we can pop this guy with the tank. So even though the copter can fight the tank here, we could trade basically copter, or we would trade tank for artillery, and it's not the worst. Like, it's kind of an even trade. We can still fight here. Like, the copter by itself is not strong enough. So we're just bringing in our massive amounts of infantry. We got the anti-air, and then we're going now. So now we got our 2 T-Copters, and so this is going to be mech time with really fast reinforce. So if we can start getting this rolling, we still have the potential to be okay, but it's certainly not really that comfortable. Now this is an interesting move. So I'm moving this copter here. The reason I'm moving this copter here, this is a very, very specific move. So we're looking at the the CO power, I'm thinking, okay, if my opponent goes for a CO power, then the way that it would likely play out is the copter would end up on this comm tower to clear off this artillery. And if that's the case, then this copter is protecting this tile and can counterattack. Wouldn't be ideal, because I'd be fighting onto a copter onto a Kindle property against CO power, but that's at least I'll have some counterplay in the event that that happens. But if that doesn't happen, then I still have the opportunity to send this copter down to this front. So it's a little bit indecisive, but it'll make more sense in a second once we finish the positioning on the other front. I kind of missed an opportunity to do some like movement shenanigans with this recon. I could have like sent it out, or with the artillery, I could have sent it like around in a little loop for these guys. But anyway, so deploys. This is kind of what we were trying to set up for before the game started. So this is copter, T-Copter, T-Copter, mech, copter, infantry. Even though we're 17K, it's not fully equal income. This is what Sami. This is where Sami wants to be. If we can just kind of stabilize the game, then this is what we're trying to set up. Additionally, so now for this copter, this artillery, I can't protect this tile. So if this copter decides to come in this way and hit the artillery, then this copter is protecting it as well. So this copter is protecting both of my artilleries from the same square. Pretty cool, right? So very precise kind of movements. So you see the recon come down there, you see the tank come over there. This is what we expected. So that's fine. So that means that we're not likely to get attacked over here, so that's good enough. More infantry fighting. Tank, artillery goes back here. Copter goes up here. Kind of nice counterattack by the tank. Thank you for the good roll. This also means that we're not going to get CO powered this turn, which is fine. And we see a tank in here. This is good information. Not super worried about the tanks, because we're starting to get some mechs online in this direction, and so it's not too bad. This, I don't know if this was necessarily a good move. So the good news for us is this infantry fight that was taken here is going to get punished really hard. We're going to be able to mop up a lot of this and end up in a pretty good position, because it's all trading into our artillery, and we've got a surprising amount of stuff here to back ourselves up. And our opponent doesn't really have good vision, because they're not on the mountain. So we're going to be stronger than our opponent expects over here. Obviously, this side is in shambles, but hey, you know, at least one side's working. So boom, boom. This, I'm pretty sure that's a 90% roll that I missed, and that means I have to take this guy off. So it actually really hurts. It really, really hurts badly, because now this infantry has to sacrifice himself to kill this guy. And 1 HP infantry as Sami are really valuable, because you can victory march them and steal cities with like really little investment. So it sucks to lose a roll that's like a 90%er, because it really does matter. Anyway, so we cleared off like all those infantry though, so that was still pretty good. And we're going to take the trade here, just to remove the artillery. It seems like it might be a bad trade at first glance, because you're trading a 6 HP tank for a 4 HP artillery. Here's my defense of this move. So first of all, my alternative would be to retreat this tank and repair it, But repairing tanks with Kindle CO power up is kind of a liability, because if Kindle decides to pop the CO power, then the tank is going to take even longer to repair, and it's going to cost me a lot of money. Additionally, having that artillery repair itself up, and it's going to be on the city, it's going to get a boosted attack next turn onto this infantry if I do nothing about it. So if I don't do anything, I'm taking additional damage. And ultimately, this tank killed an artillery and did 1 HP of damage to the copter. So it's already kind of net value equal. And just killing an artillery that's very far forward and removing it from the board is just nice, because it allows me to play more defensively and more positionally, and I can play back further. So this tank surely will come across to the city and finish clearing off my tank, but that's okay, because if this tank is doing that, then this tank is not hitting any of my stuff here, and it's already gotten its value, so I'm happy to live with that. So overall, this front going pretty well, all things considered, despite the copter kind of coming in and wrecking my world. And now the anti-air is going to be here pretty soon. So this copter can't afford to hang around here much longer and kill all my stuff without the threat of counterattacks. Now, down here, I am really unhappy to see that this comm tower is being capped, because I thought that I had damaged enough infantry that there weren't any more. And not only are there more, I see like there's 2 more full HP infantry. Where are these freaking infantry coming from? It's killing me. So I really agonized over this turn and how I wanted to do this, because the only way that I can delay this further is I have to sack this 3 HP infantry into the comm tower to delay it a turn. And sacking low HP infantry as Sami is not that wonderful, because we are getting kind of close to Victory March, and so your low HP infantry are really great for just suiciding onto properties on your Victory March turn that would normally be safe properties for your opponent. But I feel like forcing my opponent to fight me kind of back here is still important. And by delaying this a turn, I'm forcing my opponent to still attack into me, and I'm going to set up a play here. Okay, so this is the classic, nobody ever expects the second artillery. Nobody expects the second artillery. So I have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen this turn. So the reason I want to delay this comm tower is because I'm going to get attacked here, and I don't want this comm tower to be online for the attack. So what is going to happen here, 1,000,000%, is the recon, which is here. Or is it here, or is it here? It's one of these two. Anyway, the recon, I think, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the recon 1,000,000% is going to go into these forests, or into this forest, and attack this infantry. That's 1,000,000% going to happen. And then the recon is going to see this artillery directly pointing at it and be like, "Oh no, I gotta kill that because the artillery is pointing at my recon. I can't let him get a free shot with the artillery. I don't want to lose the recon. It's a bad trade for me. And also, this wall is like really weak. I can totally bust through this wall with my tank." Yeah, so basically exactly what I expected to happen happened, but I am really set up here. I'm finally online on this front. I've got a lot of copters. This is ready. I've got the mech that's pretty close to position. I've got, you know, some infantry that can fight here. And also everything is positioned very carefully because we know that we knew the recon's going to end up in this forest, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is, whoops. So this is what my opponent sees. Look at what my opponent doesn't see. All of this stuff is deliberately set up just out of vision. Because we're trying to kind of do the same thing to our opponent that our opponent did to us early. We're looking like, look how strong I am up here. I'm reinforcing everything this way. Actually, no, I'm really starting to commit everything this way. I lose that 1 HP infantry. Really mad about that roll. And so this copter has to retreat now, knowing that it was kind of on a timer, right? Like the copter can kind of run around here, and because it got its first hit free a couple of turns ago, it knows it's got some time to hit my stuff without any copters or anti-air showing up. But now that timer is expired, and my opponent correctly moves it back here, which is fine. And I guess the important thing for me is that I've got this control over the mountain, so I see it. So I know kind of it's back here. Okay. So this turn is really, really critical for me. Anytime that we're getting right up to where the CO powers can become a factor, the importance of the details in your turns start to get magnified. This turn is a turn that, if played incorrectly, can absolutely lose me the game. I can't really win the turn or win the game this turn, but I can definitely lose the game this turn. So I need to be really, really careful and play this turn out correctly. And if you watched my previous video where I was going over the Smacky Cup 2 Grand Finals, this is kind of a similar situation where LaskaLarnar was in a position where you could potentially receive a superpower, and so it's really critical that you set up in a way that allows you to not die if you end up receiving the superpower. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this turn, and because it is so precise, and it has to be, everything has to be a very specific way in order for me to not die. And so this is maybe, you may never have experienced setting up a turn this precise before, so I just want to go through the thought process of setting up what is a really critical turn in a turn where I can kind of do whatever I want, right? Especially like on this front. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but I can pretty much set up all these units here however I want. So there's like a ton of different configurations in how I can set everything up, and what we choose in the end really, 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 really matters for the next turn. But there's a few things that we're going to do no matter what. So this side is pretty easy to figure out. So obviously we're going to hit this tank, and we're going to send this copter into this tank, and then we're going to send the recon into this guy. And I lose another roll. I didn't bother to go look up this roll because I knew like no matter what I was going to do this, but I'm pretty sure this was like 70% plus in my favor. Actually, you know what? I'll look it up right now. I'll go figure it out. Okay, I take it all back. I went and checked it. It was only actually like a 25% chance to clear this guy. I thought that it received a counterattack from a 4 HP infantry, but it was actually a 3 HP infantry. So the little details like that matter. Okay, we'll unsaltify, we'll desalinate that roll. But anyway, I can use this infantry to kill this. So at least we are clearing infantry, but we are going to have to give up this comm tower. We can't do anything about that. We can't even like, it's not worth risking, YOLOing this copter in, because even if we YOLO the copter in, it's got 1 capture point left, and we just can't clear this guy. So, but it's okay because it's going to let us. It let us take that fight there without the comm tower being captured. So, and it forced it forced the tank to come in and die to this this counterattack here. So one thing that's interesting is this recon does see this tank. Actually, let's go back here. This is a really interesting situation. I could hit this tank with this copter, and I am electing not to because of the charge. So the charge left over right now is 5k, and if I attack the copter into the tank, then I will be doing. I'm basically putting Kindle in a position where she can superpower immediately at the beginning of her turn. And I don't know if Kindle wants to superpower next turn, but it is definitely a possibility, and I need to prepare the entire rest of my turn around the possibility of a Kindle superpower next turn. So the problem, in addition to the problem of sending this copter in, giving charge here, I do know that if Kindle supers, Kindle has a copter down here. We saw it earlier. It retreated in here. We don't know exactly what square it's on, but it's somewhere around here. Kindle supercopters one-shot my copters. So what we really need is we just need this copter to be alive with this copter, because this copter is likely to get hit by the copter down here. It's really likely, right? The copter, if the copter is just one square out of vision, then it's going to end up hitting this copter like 100%. Now, if it's further back, then we might get really lucky, and the copter can't even do anything. Well, that'd be like the best case scenario, but it's kind of unlikely. It's a little hopeful, right? So, we're expecting copter to come in and hit this copter. So we want to have two copters in reserve, because if we get superpowered next turn, then we want the copters available for the counterattack. So I think it is just better to leave the copter. Additionally, this copter has never been seen by this recon. It's always been just out of vision. And so by leaving the copter back, we are basically disguising our strength to our opponent. The alternative would be to send the copter up here to flex to this front for a counterattack up there. That could also be good, but it's kind of hard for me to know whether there's going to be a lot of vehicle reinforcements coming this way or this way, because it's always hard to know. Like you have the ability to kind of flex reinforcements to one side or the other. Now we've seen a lot of stuff show up here, so I kind of imagine that this is the primary reinforced front currently. And it kind of has to be for our opponent, because we control this area, and these three squares can reach this HQ, and look at how close I am to superpower. So Kindle, this is where this black boat being off the HQ really matters. Kindle has to respect the possibility of some kind of big commitment to clear off whatever is on the HQ and just win the game instantly. So now this is our win condition coming into play. That being said, we cannot stay here. We can't stay here. It's too dangerous. Kindle superpower is really, really, really strong. And there's still a decent amount of stuff here. There's one tank, two tank, a recon, and there's a copter that's probably just beyond here. We know that this recon is probably 2 turns ago from this base, and this tank is 2 turns ago from this base. So our main objective for this turn, for this front, is to have this front not die if we get superpowered. And in order to make that happen, we need to be out of 2-turn reinforce from both the base and the airport. So that means everything must be behind this line here. We can afford to have 0 units on this line. It must all be behind this line, because if there's a copter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like if there's a copter built last turn and moved up 1 square, as long as we're behind here, as long as we're on this line and behind it, that copter cannot attack us during the superpower turn. And additionally, if there was a tank built, or a recon built for that matter, from this base, then as long as we are on this line, then that recon or tank will not be able to participate in the superpower as well. And it is absolutely critical that we keep as many units alive as possible, because Kindle units are going to one-shot my stuff during superpower, because Kindle is freaking cracked. Okay, so in terms of what we are going to get hit by, we know, fortunately, because we've had this vision, that we know that, so this is, there kind of can't be anything extra, right? We kind of, because our vision has been very good, we kind of know exactly the number of units there that could potentially come in and fight us if there's a superpower. So we know 1 recon, 2 tanks, and a copter, and then, you know, some infantry. But it's just going to be those 4 power units. So we need to make sure that if all those units come in and fight us, that we are set up so that we can win the fight. And that's challenging because we stopped reinforcing this side. We started sending all our copters down here. So we actually don't have a lot of stuff here. And we can't really fight very easily against 2 tanks, a recon, and a copter. I mean, we've got like artillery, 2 mechs, a recon, and an anti-air, and then a bunch of beat-up infantry. So I'm going to show you the positioning that I'm coming up with, and then I'll explain why it's positioned this way. Okay, so we're positioned like this. The reason that this has to be the way it is because if the 2 tanks commit in, we have 3 units that can kill tanks. It's these 3. If the tanks commit to us, we need 2 of these to be still alive after the tanks commit into us. So that is what we are optimizing for. We're optimizing for 2 of these 3 units to stay alive. That's the whole plan. And then the anti-air can deal with the copter. So as long as 2 of these stay alive, then we're okay. The thing that we have going for us is that these 2 mechs have not been spotted at any point by our opponent. So our opponent doesn't know necessarily the amount of damage that needs to be done during a potential superpower in order to actually break this formation. But if the reality is, if 2 out of these 3 get taken out, it's going to snowball against us really, really hard. But if 2 of the 3 are alive, it's going to snowball the other way really, really hard. So everything depends on 2 of these 3 staying alive. And the reason we can set up so nicely is because we know exactly how many units our opponent has to come in. So again, we said the 2 tanks, recon, and a copter. So the nice thing about having infantry here is that even a superpower tank cannot one-shot this infantry on a city. I know that's an insane thing to say generally in Advance Wars, but Kindle is insane. So, but all the vehicles, and I think even the infantry can one-shot my infantry. So we're looking at so the first thing that's going to happen, so all this stuff is out of vision, first of all, because the recon's here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the recon sees this front line, but nothing else. So we're likely to see like this guy, this infantry come in for vision, because there's no reason not to, right? I guess he doesn't really see anything new, does he? He sees the city being capped, right? So my opponent sees this, but this is not in vision. Okay, so we know that the infantry is likely to move up here, and then all my crap's going to start dying. So I think this infantry probably kills this, and then but even if the infantry kills that, then all that gets revealed is this. So our mechs are still unseen. So eventually, the recon has to commit to something. And I'm gambling that the recon is going to commit to either like this city, or maybe this infantry is going to commit to this city. And as long as the recon doesn't commit to this infantry, I think we're okay. Because there is a world where we can be broken. So the copter can kill this infantry, and then the recon can kill this infantry, and then this tank can kill this mech, and then this tank can kill this mech. And if that happens, we're going to have a bad day. But the reason that it's very unlikely that that will actually happen is because in order for that to happen, you need to know that the two mechs, you need to know the positioning of this beforehand. And you don't. The only way you can know the positioning of that beforehand is if you use the recon. So there's no reason why the copter would know to come in and kill this specific infantry as the first move. Because you would kind of, it's like the chicken and the egg, right? Like you don't need that, you don't know that that's the only solution until you move the unit that prevents that from being a solution. Okay, that's the beauty of fog, right? That we're playing fog, not standard. So you don't have perfect information. So not everything has to be foolproof. But so this is the formation that I came up with. And again, like there's no obligation for our opponent to actually commit in here. But if our opponent doesn't commit here, then we are likely to get this city and equalize the game. And then we are going to be putting pressure on this HQ because we still do have an infantry on the comm tower. So as long as there's an infantry on the comm tower, the instant victory scenario for Victory March is online. So Kindle's got to worry about that and be concerned about the game ending that way. Okay. Well, we spent a lot of time talking about this turn. So let's see what happens. We've set up as best we possibly can for the superpower, and let's see if it actually comes. The copter comes in, so that was, we always knew that was very likely to happen because we knew that this copter existed. Okay, so we lose this infantry, and now the superpower is coming. So now we hold on to our butts. The recon comes in and it hits this guy. As soon as I saw this, I was like, okay, I think we're probably good. So now the copter comes in, but now it's too late. There's not enough units to fully break this wall. So the two tanks come in, the artillery dies, but again, the win condition is 2 out of the 3. And right now, 2 out of the 3 are living. So again, this is why we couldn't have anything on the mountains. If we had something on the mountains, this tank could have done damage to us and killed another unit that we needed to wall for all this, because you see how our wall just got absolutely torched here. So this is one of those situations where the details mean everything. Every single one of those details that we took into consideration last turn were absolutely vital, and if everything had been positioned just slightly differently, we would be in a situation where one of these tanks is going to survive, and you're going to see that, like, as we play this next turn, if one of these tanks survives, everything is totally different in terms of how things are going to spiral. So first of all, this turn basically plays itself. So we send this guy down, we victory march, and we're really victory marching purely for the bonus damage to the mechs. We're not really going to get a lot of value in terms of capturing cities. Getting this, putting this copter here was really nice because it revealed this artillery. I managed to lose another 50-50 roll here to get that guy down to 5 instead of 4. But because I've disguised my air power commitment on this front so well, and I haven't shown either of these 2 copters previously, and because we see like all the stuff getting reinforced in this direction, I'm pretty confident. And also we see, so this artillery is newly reinforced here. So I'm pretty confident that there's a good chance there's no actual additional anti-air on this side. And I'm just going for it. Like, even if there's an anti-air that shows up here, there's likely not to be any copters, and so these we'll eat it. But this copter is saving this mech's life, basically, by weakening the artillery. So there's some risk, but we're definitely getting a reward, even if we get unlucky and there's an anti-air waiting for us. Now on this side is a little awkward. So the way that we want to do this is this 1 HP infantry needs to cap this city, and then we want this 3 HP guy potentially to cap this city, but we don't know if this city is blocked or not. So we want to use the recon here, ideally, to kill or at least damage either this infantry or this infantry, to show us whether we can actually go for this, to reduce the risk. Because obviously, if there's something sitting on the city, then we're not going to send the 3 HP infantry just to die randomly. So, but we get to do more rolling because the 2 mechs are going to be attacking into these 2 tanks, and the roll is 93% to 102. And I'm going to see what the actual math is on that. Okay. I take it back. So it's 94 to 102 is the damage roll on this mech. So basically, it would be really, really helpful if I could get one of these 2 mechs to one-shot one of the tank. It's a 30% roll for me, but we're going to get 2 rolls at it. So it's essentially a coin flip. 50-50 for whether I one-shot one of them or not. And the reason it matters is because if I don't one-shot them, then I have to use this infantry to finish off the 1 HP tank. And if I don't one-shot either of them, then this recon has to be the one that deals the finishing blow. So, let's see if I get lucky. No. No. Okay, well, we did not have a lot of good rolls this game. I think we lost like almost every single 50-50 roll this game. But so anyway, good play trumps rolls anyway. So recon sees there's a copter here. That is fine. Don't mind seeing a copter there. That just means that we won't be sending this guy over. So we just send this guy back. We cap the city with the 1 HP recon. Obviously, we're not getting a lot of value. We would love to have, something in like one of these 2 cities that we could try to go for, maybe this property to flip that. That'd be really nice. But we didn't have any luxuries this game. We weren't in a position to make that happen. But critically, this anti-air can come onto this comm tower. Now this comm tower is really high defense, and next turn it's going to be Sami superpower with the extra defense, and there's only 1 tank. So it's really unlikely that this anti-air can be removed, which means that this copter is useless. So now you see why it's so important that both of these guys lived. Because if one of these tanks stays alive, then there's 2 tanks left over to clear this anti-air, and then that means that the copter can fight. So it's literally the difference between the attack being stone cold dead on this side versus me getting everything wiped out on this side. It's hanging on the razor's edge. I'm using like a lot of unintentional wrestling references in this video. Okay. But now, so this is the power of the T-Copters, right? Like now we got a lot of mechs here, the tanks showing up. But again, if this anti-air died next turn, none of this stuff shoots the copter. So it's a big problem. And then we're actually going to flex the mech over to this side because I'm kind of getting the impression based on the... So we see this copter. This is a 2-turn copter from here. And then we see the 2-turn tank, which is a 2-turn tank from here. So this means that essentially 100% of the reinforcements is going to this front. So we can kind of just stabilize this front, and we can be pretty confident that this front is going to win because there's very unlikely to be like more stuff coming to this direction. We have enough stuff here to win, so we should just be reinforcing here. So it seems a little counterintuitive to have a victory march that literally only gets one property, but victory marches can give plus 80% damage and make mechs kill tanks. And if it weren't for Kindle also having a power-up, those mechs would have one-shot the tanks. So pretty good. And that's the end of the game, just right there. And it is correctly over because this anti-air can't die. And if we take off the fog here, this anti-air cannot reach this copter. So all this stuff is dead. It can't fight. If it retreats, I can still just snowball here. And this copter, like, further fighting into this will fail. And the double T-Copter is just going to overwhelm everything. Is a pity that I couldn't take this this city though. Would have been nice if that had worked out, but it just didn't. It didn't happen, and that's how it goes. So anyway, this was for 15 turns. This was an incredibly difficult game, and as I reflect upon the Sami pick in this matchup, I feel like this matchup is a lot like playing Eagle against Olaf, where I think it's balanced and that Sami is viable in tier 3 on this map. But man, Sami has to work really hard. And it's probably only balanced at like the 1700 level. I don't think there's a lot of 1400 players that can make Sami work on this map in tier 3. Now, tier 4, go nuts. Tier 4 should probably only be Sami on this map. And I think even in the map testing channel, I was like, hey, we might want to ban Sami in tier 4 on this map. But we'll see. But similar to how Eagle against Olaf is something that it's like often it's balanced, but you really have to know what you're doing as Eagle. And as Sami in this matchup, like, man, if I hadn't gotten beaten down as much by that copter timing, as if that hadn't gone so badly, it's possible that it would have just snowballed really fast in my favor, and it could have been played out a little less tense. But boy, I had to work hard and like really rack my brain on positioning and things like that. So it was a very, very challenging win. So I know this video is going on for a very long time, but we're actually going to look at another replay. We're not going to spend too much time looking at this, but shortly after this game was played, there was another Sami versus Kindle match, a pretty high level game. Then we're going to take a look at how this matchup can play out and see if like other people can replicate this kind of strategy. So let's hop on over to that one. Okay, we're back at the second replay, and this is going to be hapahauli. I'm going to butcher that name more times before this video is over, I'm sure. Playing Kindle against LaskaLarnar, who needs no introduction after the previous video. Smacky Cup 2 finalist. And LaskaLarnar is going to be playing Sami against Hapahauli's Kindle. Let's see how this goes. I will try to make this not nearly as long as the previous video because my voice hurts. All right. So standard stuff so far. We're going to be following LaskaLarnar playing Sami this time as well. And this is a day 3 strong side recon. That is a little bit surprising. I'm not really sure what this is hoping to accomplish. Maybe trying to disrupt an early Kindle play towards this comm tower, if I had to guess. But this is a very, very early recon, and it's kind of weird to have an early recon from the back base as well, because the whole point of an early recon is to basically get to a certain objective as early as possible, but then you're also building it from the back base. So I also don't know about this positioning. I guess you're getting to this city faster, but I feel like it's better to go here. So already seeing some kind of weird things in this opener that, I mean, I'm not going to say it's bad necessarily because I don't know how it's going to develop, but it's a little weird. This infantry can still reach this city, so that's fine. Okay, so I guess building it from back here, you do get to see this comm tower. So I think the idea is if Kindle basically tries to rush this comm tower, then you do have the ability to disrupt it because you can get to this forest in time. But you're kind of gambling a lot on Kindle doing that exact opener. And well, we'll see what happens the next turn, right? We'll see if an infantry shows up here. We got another recon down here. Okay, so nothing shows up. So what is this recon going to end up doing? That's my question. Is really early investment in something that's not an infantry. So it really needs to get some kind of value. And this is like a really passive infantry on this side. Not necessarily a bad infantry, but it is very passive because you're not able to see this comm tower. I guess it does make sense because I guess next turn you can see it with the recon and you can decide to go for it. But I kind of like it better if you're going to put him here, because then at least next turn, if this comm tower ends up being like blocked or something, you at least have the option to maybe go take this city. And you're kind of unlikely to get harassed here. Also, I don't like, well, I guess it doesn't really matter that much. I would like to see this recon move first, just so you can plan the rest of your turn. Especially like not moving it before the deploys. Like I feel like the ordering is not great. So you see early mech, so this is fine. Okay, and we go in, and this kind of stinks a little bit because the Kindle recon saw this recon go in, so your element of surprise is gone a little bit, and now Kindle knows that this is a day 3 recon as well. So this is kind of like the worst case scenario a little bit. And see this infantry is positioned here, which means it has a lot of options. So I like this opener from Kindle because this recon spots the harass coming in, and then it's like, okay, well, now this infantry is not going to need to commit to this comm tower. We just do the comm tower later. But this infantry is still going to get some value by either going for this city or this city, and it's not really feasible for a Sami recon to interrupt that. Yeah, so see, this is nice. So this recon, I didn't bother going back to see what day it was built on. It looks like a day 4, maybe a day 4 recon or day 5 recon. I think it's probably day 5 or day 4 rather. Is going to block this city. So yeah, this recon is getting value, and this recon was an early investment that's not getting any damage done. Or at least not yet. We'll see. Maybe it still will, but again, anytime you open a day 3 recon, you're doing some damage to your own economy, so you need to get something out of it to make it worthwhile. Now we are gonna see Sami get this comm tower most likely. It's pretty hard for Kindle to completely deny the comm tower. At best, you're gonna send a recon in here, and then you can damage the infantry, but the cap is still gonna go through, which is still pretty valuable. Wow, okay. Okay. All right. So that's fine, I guess. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so yeah, so this is I guess kind of nice because you are baiting the recon to, like, you know, come in, attack my infantry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're saying come in, attack my infantry here from this tile, but I don't really feel like that's likely to happen, because that'd be a pretty substantial overcommitment from Kindle. I don't know. I also kind of feel like this recon probably should have moved before this recon, because I feel like you see this recon, if you move this recon first, then you see this infantry, and actually provides an opportunity to potentially deny this city, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but just trust me on this. But if you're going to deny that city, then this recon needs to be here instead of here. And being here, you can still see the comm tower, and you can still spot this forest, but you have to do it in the other order. It's a little bit kind of like hard to know until it happens, but so yeah, so this recon comes in here and is gonna hit the infantry, but it won't stop the capture, and it's not the end of the world. But knowing what we know now as Sami, so we've seen there's a recon here, and there's a recon here. So this city is actually pretty vulnerable to harass, but the recon needed to be here. It's kind of like a crazy line, but actually this recon can go here, and this tile is actually very hard to reach for the player in the top left. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So tank move brings you here and here if you have a tank coming from this city. But if this recon goes here, then any tank that was built from this base, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, yeah, so would be here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah. So you can go in here and hit this, and then if there's no tank here, you can actually send in the other recon to finish off the infantry from here, and it's totally safe. And then you could get value out of this. And then this day 3 recon at least gets something out of it. But instead, I mean, this recon has accomplished nothing, unfortunately. You know, this is missed opportunity, I guess. But I mean, sure, you see the recon, but like this is not actually accomplishing anything. You can't remove the Kindle recon from the comm tower. It's not going to happen. I guess it's okay, because you have this bottom left comm tower, but if Kindle just pushes really hard down here, like, what can you do to stop it? Like, all the reinforcements are going up this way. Wow, an APC. So I don't love the APC, because the APC at least does refuel the black boat, but the APC is like a worse version of a T-Copter, because you're sacrificing one infantry, and you're sacrificing one Sami infantry, and then also the APC has to deal with all this obnoxious terrain, and you have no option with the APC to flex over to this front like the T-Copter does. So I feel like the APC is just not nearly as good. And this recon is running absolutely wild all over the and the double recon. So this is what, like, if you're playing against Sami, this is why you want to have a lot of recons, because the double recon harass into Sami is really quite strong, especially if you've got that vision established and you know that there can't be any mechs hiding. You kind of just harass stuff and you wait for a tank to tell you that you can't harass anymore. And it's kind of hard for it to be bad. Ooh, and gonna give up this location too. So this front is already in shambles for Sami. This is a really bold place for a recon to be. I don't know if I really endorse that positioning. Wow, yeah, this is I guess, I don't know. Maybe there's some reason why the recon can't just stay in this forest or something like that. Because this city is still within 2 turns reinforced from the base, so I don't know. Like, is the vision really worth it? Although, to be fair, this roll, this attack, even with 1 tower, is like a 25% to kill, because it's Sami, and the Sami vehicles are, even with a comm tower, they're just normal vehicles. So it seems like it's unlucky, but it's actually, it would be very lucky if this actually cleared off. I don't know I don't even know if there's a roll with the 4 HP infantry, but anyway. So it is pretty clear what the plan is, but I feel like this is becoming Sami's strong side. If you're gonna make this your strong side, you need to at least prevent this comm tower from going through. Whoops, as I pop out of the game like a smart person. Yeah. Where were we? Yeah. You need to prevent this comm tower cap from going through, because otherwise, like, are you going to be able to flip this comm tower faster than Kindle's going to be able to flip this comm tower? Based on the way the fighting's gone, I don't think so. So I don't think you can afford to give Kindle that comm tower, even at the cost of letting this recon live. I think it's more important, because what is this recon going to do? It's really hard for this recon to retreat anywhere. Anyway, I guess maybe you can get up all the way to here, but that's about the best that the recon can do. So yeah, this comm tower is going to get flipped. I mean, you can delay it for a while, but you're so weak down here that you're going to be running out of infantry. Oof, this is brutal. Yeah, it's like you're just so weak on this front. Yeah, and this is what happens. Like, if you don't set this up with like an artillery or something, once you start like trying to send vehicles from this base to reinforce this front, first of all, it's so slow because you really need 3 vehicle moves to be able to get to where you need fighting. But then also you're not building infantry out of this base, so you just like run out of infantry. And so if you want to delay this stuff, you're kind of needing to sacrifice infantry into a losing fight to make that happen. And then you end up, you run out of infantry, you can't fight anymore, and you're Sami. It feels bad. I mean, I get it. Why not use the tank? I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. What do you think is the strong side? I mean, I guess. I don't know. At least it feels bad. I mean, I guess the reason you do it is because you don't vision this square, right? But if you're going to go in the first place, it feels, well, this is a desperation right here. This is a weak side capture. There's like no world that this works, right? Oof, and you're losing the city. This is like, this feels really, oh wow, and the copter in the center, you got nothing to do with copters at all. Like, there's not even a copter being built, no anti-air. Like, this feels really, really, really bad for Sami. If you don't have like a really sound opener as Sami, if you're playing against tier 3 CO, like, this is what it can look like. This is, oof, that's unlucky. But I mean, you're fighting single infantry into properties against Kindle. I mean, it's just, you got tanks fighting into copter range. You do see the artillery, so that's kind of nice. I mean, so at least like this position now is kind of online finally. But I mean, you have no vision on the weak side. Like, for all you know, like, this stuff is going to get absolutely trounced. Ooh, there's an artillery in here. Yep, that hurts. Oof. Oh. Oh. So this is going to deny this comm tower cap. So this is a pretty devastating power, and this is one of the nice things about playing Kindle. You can opportunistically use your CO power if you feel like you're going to have a good opportunity to do a lot of damage with it. But if there's no good opportunity, then you can always just hold it, and it's still amazing as a superpower. So that flexibility as Kindle is really hard to play against. And so if you're against Kindle, you have to be extremely careful, because that CO power is getting a lot of damage, weakens the tank, weakens the mech. I mean, Kindle doesn't know, but it hit the Neo tank as well, that's really, really painful. Because that's like multiple turns of income saved up to kind of go for a Hail Mary Neo tank, and obviously there's nothing to ever contest this copter as well. So it's kind of dunsies already. I can't see any way that Sami can possibly recover here. And obviously there's no pressure on the HQ either. And now it's 2 comm towers to 0. And going to stay that way for the rest of the game. It seems like it's pretty crazy for the copter to be here, but seeing the Neo tank, I mean, you know that it's safe now, I suppose. Wow. Yeah, this I'm not needing to cover this in much detail. This is the death spiral for Sami. Like, if you don't manage to establish things in the early game and kind of get things going, in a positive direction, then your games can end up looking a lot like this, where it kind of doesn't matter what you do. You're just going to get kind of stopped. So yeah, no, there's never been any counter to copters at all, and a bunch of copters show up, and that's the end. Yeah, so this obviously went very differently than the other game we looked at. I think my verdict on this is Sami as a tier 3 seal on this map is viable, but probably don't try this at home. That's kind of my conclusion. And if I ever get in this situation again, I'm not completely sure I'd go with Sami again, just based on how difficult it was in my match to make it all work. Although I was able to make it work, but it was quite difficult. So anyway, thank you if you're somehow still here after 2.5 hours of this. I appreciate you. Thanks for sticking around to the end. I probably won't be covering all of my Global League games like this in the future, but because this was such a uncommon matchup, I thought it would be worth a video. So thanks for checking it out. I don't know what will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. I'm still kind of waiting for my next round of tournament matches to start. It's possible that we might have like a couple of Smacky Cup 3 and 4 matches come through around the same time, but I'm guessing it won't be for another month or so before those get resolved at the pace that things are going with matches that I'm not involved in, kind of holding things up. So we'll see where that goes in the future, but I am trying to at least start playing a little bit of Global League now that the new rotation has hit. So I'm not going to be going super crazy and like queuing 25 or anything like that, but I am going to be trying to be a little bit more active, because I think it's fun to be able to do a little bit more experimental stuff like I did in this game, and see if I can make it work against some pretty tough competition. So with that said, that's going to wrap it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.